Hello. Oh, let me put where's my earphones? Oh my God.
Good morning, everybody. We'll get started in just a minute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can
Okay,
hear
I
you.
can't hear anybody on that end, so I ran to grab a different set of earphones. Sorry about the rough start to this.
That is okay. We have about 38 people online. We have a good showing. Thanks, everybody, for taking the time today. Here, well, I'll kind of get you oriented a little bit while Kathy's doing that.
I got it.
Hello. Okay.
Finally, sorry. Thank you, Jamie.
Yep.
It has been a little bit of a rough morning. Just got back from running my dog to the vet for some issues. So we'll try and be calm. Anyway, so here we are. Right now, you guys don't have any anything that you can do except for type some questions in the question and answer room and raise your hand. So I'm going to ask you all to raise your hand in the on your control panel. And if you don't know where that is, we're going to show you anyway. And raise your hand if you've seen this Flood After Fire brochure before.
Oh, it's not showing quite yet.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good for me to go. Okay. Well, let's see. Raise your hand if you're
There you
here
go.
and know what's going on, which wouldn't be me right at this moment.
You're going to be a leg up from everybody today. It's going to be one of those days. It's a week already.
Yeah. It's already one of those weeks, and it just keeps going that way. It's another Monday, right?
Right.
Monday number 2 this week.
Monday number 2.
Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna take a look at how many people's hands are up. So we have 14 people, 15 people of 38 people that have showed up so far, whose hands are up. So good to know. And now we're going to give you a little bit more information in case you didn't know where to raise your hand or what this platform is or anything like that, because it's a little bit different of a platform if you haven't been in this before. We did use this for Utah Floodplain Stormwater Management Conference recently. But just so you can see, and we'll let you guys talk today. We didn't let people talk at that conference. If you were there, it was more just putting your answers in the question and answer room. Please, if you have questions, do put them in the question and answer room. That would look like this arrow here opens up your control panel for GoToWebinar, and should give you these basic options that you have right now. You as an attendee will only have these basic options. So you'll be able to download the handouts. I wanted to get a few more in there, but the way my day went, it didn't happen, but you do have some. Then you can put all your questions in this question box. If you want to break these out, you can click on this little square box on the right side with a little arrow in it. And if you left click on that, it will actually break it out into its own separate entity. So I like to do that so I can see what's going on with all of you as I get going, but it's a good way to open up, download what handouts we do have in there, and hopefully I'll get a couple more in there. I'll probably do that while Jamie's talking later, so that you can have a few more handouts that I did want to get to you. Right now, you should have a handout that is what a floodplain development permit looks like, a sample floodplain development permit that you can use for your community in case you don't have one, as well as some information about IBC codes and NFIP and floodplain management codes. And those are all things that when you're doing this class, if you hadn't seen them before, you're going to want to download and you're going to want to have ready for yourself because it is part of floodplain management. You also have this raise hand arrow that I asked you to raise. Now put it down if you can find it. Now I think, you know, you can test out a little, put it up, put it down, see how that goes. So I've got only 4 people left with their hand up, 3, it's going down. So that's good. We're just getting you familiar with this platform. You can change the view of how you want to look at your view on the platform right here as well. And another function that you have is if you're in, for me, I have to go to Windows viewing mode, not full screen mode to get these options. So you may have to as well, but there's a zoom feature so you can put it actually fit to size. If you're like me and a little bit blind as far as seeing things close up, if I don't have my glasses on, or even then sometimes I need to have this zoom in, which I do all on this. So you have a zoom feature, you have a screenshot, so you can make the screen bigger, larger, take a screenshot if it's something you're like, oh, I want to remember this, and you can break your screen into like separating out our faces and different, and the PowerPoint presentation by hitting a button that looks like this. So feel free to put any questions you have in the chat room. I'm going to open up at some point so you can verbally ask questions as well in this one, because I don't think we'll have as many people as we have in some others. We did have 50 some odd registered, and looks like 40 of you have joined us. So we're doing pretty good so far. So just so you're aware, you won't have all these options that are on this screen, but when you do click on those handouts to get them, it just breaks it out like this, and then you just click on them and download them, and they will be there for you so you can use them, which is great because they are very useful tools if you haven't got those handouts already. Let me think if there's something else. If you need to check your audio, there is an audio here as well where you can, if you needed to call in because you're not hearing us well, there's a number to call in there or change where you're listening to your audio from. So that's all I'm going to do with that. And I am going to pull up what our main information is today. I'm going to go first, and then Jamie's going to give you a lot of good information about risk map as well. And if I can move to my next slide deck, that would be wonderful. Okay. And if some of you have been through this training, great. It's good for a refresher, but we will try and add some extras in today. Like I said, Jamie's going to do some things here today that we normally have not done in this training. And this is the first time we have done this separately from our NFIP 101. So this is the basics of what your community needs to do for floodplain management. So what the community's role is and what the floodplain administrator's role is, because they're both the same thing. If you are part of the National Flood Insurance Program, you need to be doing all of these things that we're going to talk about. And if you're missing a piece of it, then talk to us. We'll help you figure out how to help implement that in your community. And I'm going to have Jamie chime in any time she wants during this with good ideas, because we both play off each other and help each other out as we're going along. Topics that we're going to go over is your authority, everyday activities, post-disaster activities, substantial damage improvement, and record keeping, as well as, I should have added it, mapping on there, because that is an important key. So what's your authority that you have to be able to do this, to be able to enforce and do floodplain management? I just realized I had a pair on my head and I put another pair on. It is a good morning. You have legislative authority if your community participates in the National Flood Insurance Program, which over 200 or about 230 communities in Utah do participate. And then we have about another 20 some odd that do not. If you're one of those, I think mostly it's the communities that participated that signed up today for the most part. But if you haven't, still good things to know and see what you have to do to be able to start doing that. So it is the city who enacts the ordinance. There are basic ordinances that come to you from the the 4400 CFR 60.3, and a few others that help you. So that's the basic. That's Federal Code of Regulations that give you the basics of what has to be in your floodplain management program and the basics of what you have to manage to. So that's the first place you would go. I have a copy. In fact, I keep it right here by my desk. There's my handy dandy code. I have one up the stairs that's the older one that's up by the side of my bed. I know I'm a real nerd, but it has lots of highlights and marks in it. So we do have that federal code, and that's what gives us the basic ordinance. And I do have a copy of a basic model ordinance that I can share with any of you, and it all depends on what level of mapping you have, what ordinance you would have in your community. So what happens if you don't participate in the NFIP? There is no NFIP flood insurance available, no federal grants or loans for development in the special flood hazard area is available. There is limited disaster assistance. So think about that. You have an earthquake disaster, there becomes limited disaster assistance from FEMA in that case if you don't participate. And then you cannot, so there, for federally backed loans or grants that are in the special flood hazard area, an actual mortgage could come due if the individual can't get flood insurance for the home, because they are required, and the mortgage company is required to make sure they have that flood insurance if they're in the special flood hazard area and they do have that federally backed loan. Conventional loans are available in the special flood hazard area, but you as a community, as the floodplain administrator, need to notify applicants of the flood hazard area, and if no NFIP insurance or disaster relief is available, and they still have to get they still have to have flood insurance if they're in those areas, if they have a mortgage. So it kind of is a catch-22 if you don't do it. So duties of the floodplain administrator, and we're going to go through all of these today, one at a time. So you don't have to write these all down right away, but I would take a snapshot of the screen, because this is a very important piece, because this gives you the basics of what your duties are. You'll find as you get into floodplain management, there's more information and more that needs to happen, but these are the basics that you need to be doing. I'm going to go with just a little bit more on that. Number one, your codes and where things come from. So you have your community ordinance that I talked about, that at least has to be the minimum standard to be part of the NFIP. Then, oh, and sorry, this is my vet calling and I have to answer. I promised I wouldn't leave it on except for this. Jamie,
I can chime in. Yeah, I can chime in while we're doing that. So this is where your regulations are located. You have a community ordinance if you participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. It's usually found in either a flood hazard determination information, but you will have something in your code that's codified, that is somewhere where it states all of your requirements for building in the and in your special flood hazard areas. That's also where it shows the legislative or the regulatory authority that you have. It is based off that Code of Federal Regulations, so a lot of the information that's in in your ordinance is based off 44 CFR, which Kathy held up, and it is also based on the building codes that you have. So if you are not talking to your building official or your planning department, there needs to be a lot of coordination between whoever uh, issues the floodplain development permits and either your permitting, your building official, your inspection folks, just to make sure that whatever building or development that is occurring in your special flood hazard area meets these requirements. So the state does have standards, and we do have, I don't know if she's got that cited in these slides here, but that there is what's called a 1-foot freeboard from the base flood elevation. That means that the lowest floor of structures within the special flood hazard area has to be built on or above 1 foot of the base flood from the established base flood elevation on the maps and in the FIS, which we'll talk about in a little while. So you do have codes, you do have regulatory authority. You also have, if someone is, she might talk about inspections a little later on, but if someone is doing work in the special flood hazard area that did not get a permit, you definitely have the authority to go and do a stop work order or anything like that. So if you have any questions about your code, Kathy does have a model ordinance that she provides to communities to make sure, and it's the minimum requirements necessary. If you want to update your code or make any improvements to your code, please feel free to reach out to Kathy, because she does have a model that you can use. And if you're going through a map update, which many of you are, you're probably going to get a copy of that anyway. But it's really important to, one, know your requirements, and if obviously you're going to have a ton of questions on the requirements. Everybody does. We still, Kathy and I learn something new every single day about the requirements and how to implement them, especially on the ground, where you guys see a lot of the activity. So what we want to do, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Kathy on that. And then, yeah, make sure you're going out, and if you're not the one going out and doing inspections, feel free to train some of your folks that do go out. Maybe your public works, maybe your city engineer if you're not that person, maybe your building officials, someone that has boots on the ground that's going out and looking at development within your community, just to make sure that it is occurring properly. And Kathy may talk about this too, but that also includes any state or federal entities that are doing any work in your community, like UDOT or NRCS or anybody like that. No one is exempt from these regulations. That includes your own community. If you're doing any work in your community in that special flood hazard area, you want to make sure that you're, it's not to be stringent, and it's not to be overly, regulatory, if you will, but you want to make sure whatever you're doing, improving, if you're dredging or if you're doing something in your floodplain, that you want to make sure as a community that you're tracking that information in the floodplain. So when you do need to go do a map update at some point, you can. So it's all based on these requirements in your code. So I didn't know what other slides you have, and I'm sorry I didn't have.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Jamie. And I apologize to the rest of you out there. I just have a very, very, very sick puppy, and I knew that was the vet calling me back and wanted to be able to let him move forward with whatever treatment he needed to do. So thank you. try and control myself. So I'm not sure, I missed out on a part of what Jamie was saying, but as we are looking at what Utah has as far as codes go, and stop me, Jamie, if you said any of this. We have in Utah currently we have the IBC codes, so the 2018 IBC codes, and it is adopted, and there are sometimes amendments that happen to that. Right now there are no amendments to our floodplain that I know of. I'm not saying there aren't any out there, but currently that I know of. We also have the International Residential Codes of 2015 that are adopted. And then as you go down here, the plumbing, mechanical, fuel, gas codes, all those things are where Utah is right now. So if you were going to ask yourself or your community a question, do you have a higher standard, which I'm going to roll out here a poll question. If your community has a higher standard now that we're at this point, and have you guys answer that. Okay, we've got about 83% of the vote in. We'll give you about 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to close the poll, and I'll share those results with you. So 39% said yes, you do have higher standards for floodplain management in your community. 61% said no. So what I would like you to do right now is in the question and answer room, go in and just give me a quick little note of what higher standards you have. If you have freeboard, or if you're thinking it's something else and why you have a higher standard, throw that in the question room. So if I could have all of you just take a minute and go into your question chat area and type in what your higher standards are, some of the basics, or if there's a specific answer you have, that would be really great. Because we are trying to track what communities are doing. FEMA wants us to know what you're doing and what higher standards you have. And if they're part of the IBC codes or IRC, or do you have something else extra as well? So if you could go ahead and do that, and I will stop doing the poll and hide it. All right, so, and if you have freeboard in your community, do me a favor and tell me how much freeboard you have. Do you have 1 foot? Do you have 2 feet? Do you have 3 feet? Did you know if you have at least 2 feet of freeboard, you can cut your citizens' insurance policy in half in price? So something to think about if you don't have at least 2 feet of freeboard in your community's ordinance, that could be a piece that could really, really help people. You know, do you have a setback or an erosion zone or any extras? I'd love to hear that. That would be fabulous to know what those things are. So as we're going through this, in the handouts, you do have this actual comparison of select NFIP and 2018 I-code requirements. So this handout is in your handouts. You can download that if you haven't already. And it kind of gives you some general ideas of what there is in there. The other one that is in the downloads, and I'm going to go over to my downloads so I'll say the right name for it, so that one was the FEMA Quick Reference Guide. The other one is FEMA Reducing Flood Losses through the I-codes, or something like that. And that one is gold. it goes through and compares like all the areas of the I codes and the ASCE 24 and the ASCE 7 and IRC codes to the basic minimum NFIP standards. So download that and have that available for your community. And why am I telling you to do this? Besides the fact that you guys have answered in there, if you have a higher standard, you should all actually say, yes, we have a higher standard, because for Utah, we have the IRC and IBC codes. Kind of a piece there that those are all higher. I mean, there are basic standards in those, but there are higher standards in those as well. So one example of that, and a lot of communities didn't know it, and they may still not know it if they haven't come to one of these classes or come to one of our Wednesday lunch and learns, is that everyone should have in their floodplain development code, and if they don't, they should be doing it anyway, because it's in the IBC codes, at least 1 foot of freeboard for residential structures. For different types, and it shows you in tables in the ASCE 24, I think it is, for different types of construction. Something that is more of a critical facility, you actually have to have 2 feet of freeboard or 2 to 3 feet of DFE. So those are important pieces to know and look at. Important for you as a community to know, if you participate in the NFIP, not only do you have your standard ordinance, but you have to be following those IBC and IRC codes that do have floodplain management codes in them. So if you didn't know that, please look at these documents, please read over them, ask me questions when either in the question room or later when we open it up for people to do verbal questions, because those are there. And yes, if you're living in Utah, you're developing in Utah, they're there for you. So so here's the next step. Besides having your ordinance in place and making sure you're doing that, you have to review applications. You have to review and evaluate development. And depending on what level of floodplain development codes floodplain development code or ordinance you have, there are more things or less things that you have to do, but all development has to be evaluated. And if you are a level, like if you have floodplain maps, we'll do it simply there. That would be a level B ordinance or on up. So it goes A, B, C, D, E. They build upon each other. They start with the basics, and each one you keep what happens in the A level code. And when it goes to B, you keep the A and the B. And then to C, it goes A, B, C all together. So you build upon the things that you need to do in the special flood hazard area with a level of codes. That goes in with the level of mapping you have in your community. So if you have floodways and you have base flood elevations in your community, you have a level D ordinance, and there are things that are required of that. If you have a V zone in your community, which we do have some V zones, then you have to go up to an E level ordinance and regulate those areas that are V zones in a particular way that you wouldn't necessarily do in a riverine situation. So we do have some of those in Utah around the Great Salt Lake. We may be getting some around Utah Lake. I'm not sure at this point. We're doing some mapping with that. So things to be looking out for. So any development in a special flood hazard area requires a permit, even in an A zone where you don't have mapping. It just, in that case, you just have to say, oh, they're going to be reasonably safe from flooding because you don't have the mapped areas specifically. But once you get those others, any floodplain in your community, then you have those higher standards and have to do a floodplain development permit. So I am going to pull up a floodplain development permit for you right now. And at least I think I am. And make sure that you guys kind of get a general look at one. You can be downloading the one if you haven't downloaded it already. That I gave you in the downloads, because we do have that there. And Oh, I do have the quick reference guide up too. Maybe I'll hurry and show you that really quick before I go to the permit. So just so you get a general look at this as well. So I'm gonna pull this over here, and you can see on this quick guide to the I codes, here's something that's referring to the base flood elevation of the lowest floor in I codes in ASCE 24. And also talking about that design flood elevation, and that fact that you need to go to ASCE 24 to look at how you need to regulate that, which I gave you a hint or two, is that 1 foot versus 2 feet of freeboard, or 2 to 3 feet of DFE, depending on the type of facility or building it is. And it goes through and it even talks about flood venting on here, what you need to do for that, how you need to elevate up mechanicals, or possibly electricals and mechanicals. So there's a lot of good information in there. How you, if you're in a certain zone, how you would do different types of fill, or putting things up on stilts, or different things that you would need to do. So good information on that, and you do have a copy of that. So here is the floodplain development permit. For this, you can take this permit and make it your own, put your community's name on it, but I just want you to see a few things on it, and I want you to go in and study and look at it closer if you don't have one after the fact. But there are some general things that need to come into play in here. Of course, all the information about where the property is, legal description, if it's a contractor or developer that's doing this, the owner, those things. Looking at the cost of the project. Why would you need to look at the cost of a project? Something that we'll go into a little bit later, but if there's substantial damage or substantial improvement, that may bring in other codes and the structure having to being brought up to the current codes and standards. So that's why you would have to look at what the estimated cost of a project is. Looking at if they're changing anything in the channel, that could require a letter of map. That could require a letter of map change, a conditional letter of map change, or other things like that. So also, the type of structure development that's happening, is it non-residential, is it manufactured home? Like I just said, substantial improvement, substantial damage. Is it a bridge, a culvert? There's different things that need to happen with each of these types of structures, and anything that is basically moving dirt in the floodplain needs a floodplain development permit. So even if you as the community is going in and doing a little bit of dredging, or putting a little fill in somewhere or anything like that, you need to issue yourself a floodplain development permit, or anybody else is doing that. Even mining operations, if they're doing in the floodplain, need floodplain development permits. So it gives you all the different things that you need to have on here. It'll have in here that, what's the base flood elevation of the structure? What's the base flood elevation of the land? You'd also need to look at elevation certificates, and the fact that if it's a structure, it needs to have an elevation certificate as well as a floodplain development permit. So I'm going to move on from here, and I know Jamie's off camera. I would ask her if she will check for me if she's available to look in the question and answer room, and just make sure if there's anything in there we need to worry about. Thank you.
Nope, I'm good. I've been monitoring, and if there is anything, any questions as we go along, please feel free. I'm monitoring, and Kathy will be monitoring when I'm talking. So
Yeah.
Please feel free to ask questions, and if we can address it, to the group, we'd be happy to do that. So anything you got, please send
Most definitely. So you have to review plans, specs. You have to have a site plan in your floodplain file, and you do need to keep a file for any structure or any work done in the floodplain, or in the special flood hazard area, sorry, the whole earth is a floodplain. It's just whether it's, low, moderate, high risk. The high risk areas are those mapped FEMA special flood hazard areas. You need to look at the foundation design and thoroughly note on the plans everything that's being done, and that this is in a special flood hazard area. All of those things need to be done, and it needs to have that floodplain development permit with it, as well as if it's a structure, an elevation certificate. We don't want to forget that piece. If those are things you're not doing right now, let me help you to make sure you get those things and you're starting them and doing them. You need to make sure that other permits are obtained. This is a big one. You need to make sure that in that file, when something's happening, that they have that, if there's a storm water permit needed, if there is septic permit, or if there is a DNR permit or stream alteration permit, or if ESA is a requirement, which it is in the special flood hazard area, you need to check on that. You either had the person developing check on that and show you proof that there's nothing there, or that if they had to do some kind of a study, that they did that and provide that to you. That needs to go in the file. You need to notify, if you're doing any water course alterations, you need to notify FEMA and the state NFIP coordinator, which is me, state floodplain manager, state NFIP coordinator. And you're also supposed to notify adjacent communities and any others required, which would be the stream alteration permits with DNR, or the 404 permits, which I believe they do those in conjunction with the DNR here in the state of Utah. So all those things need to be kept in that file. And that is all part of the floodplain development permitting process, things that you have to have. So you have choices with that permit that I showed you. You have the choice as the floodplain administrator and the community to issue floodplain development permit if you think, oh yeah, they've got everything down, they're going to build it right, they're going to elevate it, they're going to make sure their electrical is taken care of, they're going to do any floodproofing that needs to take place with any areas that need floodproofing. You can conditionally approve it. Say, oh no, I need you to go get a conditional letter of map revision from FEMA before I'm going to let you develop there, because I'm worried, or because it's in a floodway, which would be one of the requirements. If you can't show no rise and it's in a floodway, then you have to go out and get that conditional letter of map revision done. So, and it may be conditional that they follow up and get a letter of map revision after they're done as well, because the conditional letter of map revision is only FEMA saying, yes, if you build it this way, you're good. Afterwards, you or they, whoever's doing the project, has to file for a LOMR, and that's the only way the map change take place and that you stay compliant when that work is done, that LOMR, letter of map revision, is completed. And we can do a whole other class on what all that means. Jamie may talk a couple of things about that. I don't know, but this is a whole other class talking about that portion. You have to inspect the development. If there's setbacks, foundation construction, flood resistant materials required, utilities and building systems being elevated, anchoring. If there's a tank, like a fuel tank that needs to go along with that structure, it has to be anchored. It needs to be held in place. So if a flood water comes, it does not wash that away and cause other issues. You also have to look out for violations. I know I'm giving you so much that you have to do as a community and as a floodplain administrator, but these are all pieces of what needs to be done. So some ways that I've talked to small communities about how they can look out for violations. Maybe your community only has 2 people on staff, but you have a city council maybe, or a town council. What you could do for the few people that are on staff and that town council and even the mayor, you could make up a little booklet showing where your special flood hazard area and say, hey, here's this little map. And if you see anything happening in that area, like somebody's throwing in fill, or all of a sudden somebody starts throwing rocks into the river, or whatever is happening, somebody starts building something, can you let me know? Because that's part of my job, is I need to make sure that somebody's got a permit for this work. And so you initiate and ask for help from whoever is available to you. If you have building officials and code officials, then you absolutely want to get them on board with knowing where the special flood hazard area is and to come and talk to you if something's happening there. In fact, if you have a building official and you're not the building official and you're the floodplain administrator, you need to get a really good relationship with your building official so that they know every time something's happening in that special flood hazard area, ding, 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 a flood development permit needs to happen, and you need to help review and know what's going on in that area. So that is a big piece. You also want to have a good relationship with your emergency manager, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I need to make sure that I get through this so Jamie can get to hers and leave her enough time. So I am going to unmute all of you. Well, actually not quite yet. For the goal of violation management on the FEMA side is that you need to bring structure or other development into compliance with state and local floodplain management regulations or reduce impacts of non-compliancy. So that if there is a violation, that's your goal. So here is a fact or fiction piece, and go ahead in the question and answer room or in the question room, give me whether you think this is fact or fiction. Nice thing is on all of these, unless you want me to share it with everybody, nobody sees what your answer is. Do put private on your messages. I forgot to tell you this up front if you don't want us to share, because if we start sharing people's questions or the answers to people's questions out into the public room, but we can send it to you privately. It will go to everyone if we share it, send it to all. So from here out, I won't send anything that's been sent previous to this, because I forgot to tell you this, out to everyone. But if you want to keep something private just between you guys and us that are presenting, then type private before you send the message. But right now, please put fact or fiction in the question and answer room for the answer to this question. A homeowner is unhappy with the base flood elevation determination you made for his house. Some of you may not make those determinations. You may require them in a lot of communities to get that done by a surveyor or an engineer. But if you did do that for them, must that person accept your determination, or can they hire a surveyor of their own? I see a lot of good educated people here saying that it is fiction. Well, yes, they can. They can go out and hire someone, a surveyor or an engineer, to look at that and dispute what's come about. So a developer plans to put a road across a creek and no bridge is shown on the plans. You talk with the state NFIP coordinator, that's me, and FEMA regional office. You find you can issue a conditional permit requiring FEMA's approval before work in this flood hazard area can be done. Fact or fiction? Go ahead and put that in the, answer that in the question.
I will say on the previous question, someone actually made a really good point. They can hire a surveyor, but you as the community still need to accept it. So if you don't accept their determination, you as a community can still not accept their determination if it didn't use proper surveying. I don't know, but yeah, you as the community still have the ability to not accept it if you do not agree with it.
Very true. Thank you. Whoever made that comment, thank you. And thank you for bringing that to the forefront, Jamie, because that is absolutely correct. If there's anything going in your special flood hazard area and you like, there's something hinky here, I don't agree with this, you do have a right to deny it or have them provide other information or anything like that.
That last one might need to be explained a little bit because we have a couple folks that.
Okay.
Might need an explanation.
All right. So, oh, well, let's go on to the answer on that. So that last one, it's a fact. As a floodplain administrator for the community, you can require additional approvals or permits as condition of granting a floodplain development permit. So say one of those things that you wanted to do is you wanted somebody to go to FEMA and get a conditional letter of map revision before they do something, because you're concerned that what they're going to do is going to cause a lot of problems in the floodplain. It's going to put flood waters off on somebody else or something like that. So you could do that. You could ask for that extra step. Now, let's say if you build that into your ordinance that you need that done for all work in the special flood hazard area, all work that's going in a floodway, it makes it a lot easier to regulate that. But you still do have the right, if you're concerned, that is one of the basic things. If you're concerned that it's going to cause more of a flooding hazard or caused a change in the floodplain, then you do have a right to ask for more things to be done. Do you have anything else to come on in that, Jamie?
Well, the only thing I would consider is I don't know if a lot of you participated in UFSMA last year, 2019, not this past one. There was a great presentation on a community in Oregon that just accepted information from an engineer. Not that I'm saying all engineers are like this, but sometimes we gotta, look at the information that's provided to us and make a determination that's best for our communities. And unfortunately, there was in this particular case in Oregon, the community floodplain administrator wasn't quite knowledgeable and accepted engineering information that ultimately wasn't the proper way to um, uh, issue flood or allow the issuance of floodplain permitting and development within that community, and ended up getting a ton of violations, floodway violations even. Um, so I kind of caution you on, I know not a lot of us are, can review this type of information, which is why the CLOMAR process is there. But, if you have any questions whatsoever about information that is provided to you, I mean, you don't have to just take, their word for it or their information. Sometimes they're missing something, and maybe it's simple, maybe it's not. So, just kind of review the information package or data package that that you're getting, and make sure that it looks good. So that's all I would kind of add to it. Just
No, yeah,
and
thank
that's
you.
why the CLOMAR process is there, so to help you out with that if you need that help.
Absolutely. So post-disaster activities, you may not have known when you became a floodplain administrator that you would have disaster activities. It's kind of one of those things that a lot are like, what? What's going on with this if you've never heard this fact? But as a floodplain administrator or as a community, if you're not the floodplain administrator, but you're here as a community official or someone learning about this for your community, yeah, there are things that need to be done that fall under the hat of the floodplain administrator, but the community, remember, all these duties that the community or that the floodplain administrator has to do, the reason they have to do it is because it's what the community's taken on for being part of the NFIP. So one of these things is post-disaster activities. So you have to conduct damage inspections and substantial damage determinations, which I kind of mentioned before and we'll talk about in more detail. You have to review plans and issue permits and inspect reconstruction activity. And we know everybody wants to get in there and redo things fast when a disaster happens, but you need to figure out and catch those things, especially if you know there's some properties that probably might have substantial damage, and we'll go over what that rule is in just a minute, that you need to make sure right away that you're contacting those individuals and have up front a plan of, and we have classes that we teach on this, but a plan of your substantial damage plan of how you're going to do that. Or do you have a permit that's a faster track permit when it's something that's in a disaster type area? So this is saying after a flood, but after any disaster, even with our earthquake, our 5.7 earthquake that we had in Magna not that long ago, a few months back, they had to look and see if they had substantial damage in the special flood hazard area, because that brought in new things that they may have to do to bring the buildings up to code. So this is showing a picture of some people with FEMA that are out and about when they have a presidentially declared disaster. They're out in the community handing out information. You, as the floodplain administrator, and get your emergency manager involved with you. And if you don't have one in the city that you're in, or if you're, go to the county and see if they'll help you. Have that relationship with whatever your level of emergency management is, whoever's doing that, start a relationship with them, because you have job duties that come under this umbrella that you have to do in the event of a disaster, if there is substantial damage, and also when there's substantial improvement. So after a flood, just looking at all this stuff that's come out of the structure, there is so much damage that happens with water damage, and you may not see all of that water damage up front. It may take a few days for you to be able to see what some of that is, like floorboards and mold and all sorts of things. So after a flood, you perform damage assessments and inspections. And if that's going to be your building inspector or your emergency manager, they need to know your rules you have to know, and they need to know what they need to be giving to you so you can have it for your records. You or they need to determine if the structures are substantially damaged, apply floodplain ordinances as appropriate, bring any violations into compliance, and you didn't know it, but you also have to promote flood insurance. I didn't know when I got this job I was going to be promoting flood insurance, but yes, it is part of the job. Why is it part of the job? Because the best way to mitigate flood risk in our state especially is through flood insurance. There's nobody, you as a community aren't going to be able to come out and pay for their flood damages on their structures. They're going to have to take care of this, even if they got individual assistance for their damages. That on average is around $3,000 to $5,000 that the individuals get if it becomes a presidentially declared disaster. But you know what? If they have flood insurance, even if it's only their structure and one other property, because that's the rule of the NFIP insurance, so it could be their structure in the street got floodwaters, then they can get money to take care of their flood damage. So here's the substantial improvement, substantial damage rule. The number you need to keep in your head. I do have substantial damage plan that we've done at the state that gives you the information how to do your own substantial damage plan in your community. If you haven't got that from me yet, reach out to me. I will get it to you. But the rule is 50% or more of the value of the structure. So remember that 50% or more of the value of the structure. That's not the land it's on, but the structure itself. There is a substantial improvement, substantial damage desk reference. I do have an electronic version of that. If you would like that, just let me know. Reach out to me about that. So costs included in this are structural items and major building components, interior finish elements, utility and service equipment, market value of all labor and materials. Remember that labor is included. Does not matter if they do the labor themselves. They still have to look at the market value of that labor and materials. Costs that are excluded are design specifications, surveys, building permits, plans, cleanup, contents, and outside improvements. We don't worry about those. Non-triggers. If there are basic health code, sanitary code, and safety code things that need to come in compliance, and this is not coming from the disaster itself. Also, if there is a historic structure, then that could alter some of the needs for things. So yeah, we keep pointing this out, but who is responsible? It's the local floodplain administrator, but let's not lay it all on your shoulders. You may be the one that's signing off on things. It is your community's responsibility. Therefore, you need to make sure that they all understand what these things are that need to be done. You need to have those relationships with your building officials, your emergency managers, and those that are making laws and regulations and doing those things in your community, because they need to understand what happens in your job, what you need to be doing. So you're looking at the market value of the structure. You can have an independent professional appraise the NFIP claims, or you can look at NFIP claims data. You can look at your tax or building department estimates. You can do the uniform residential appraisal report. These are ways you can look at to compare and decide what you're going to use. What I would say to you is make sure you use the same process every time. You're going to get yourself in trouble if you don't always use the same way to look at how you're valuing that property, and always use the same process for everybody. Doesn't matter if they're the mayor, they're your brother-in-law, they're the richest guy in the neighborhood. You need to do it all the same so that you don't open yourself up for legal action. So improvement or damage costs, repair improvement costs, you can look at qualified contractors estimate, NFIP data again. That's if they have an insurance policy and they've got damage. Standard building codes, Marshall Swift codes. As we said, tax assessor surveys or other government agencies and departments, you can look at those. So you guys make a call on this, this particular situation really quick, and answer in the question and answer room. If the pastor of the First Lutheran Church in an AE zone with first floor 2 feet below BFE has come for a development permit to expand the parish hall, market value of the church is $250,000. He's got his lumber, hardware, and his labor is donated. So what do you think? Yes, no, substantial damage, maybe? Go ahead and put your answer in the question room. Can see some smart people in here. So in this case, you need to know the value of labor. Substantial improvement needs to be calculated with all costs. So good going. Some of you put that in there. Smart to know. Second one, you make the call. During a flood, the house at 35 Creekway is zone AO, was damaged. The damage estimate so now we have the actual cash value of the house, $74,365. We're looking at the foundation, framing, floor covering, and built-in appliances. So what do you think? What would your answer be to this? Go ahead and put that in the question room, please. So yes, this is substantial damage. Repair costs are more than 50% of the actual cash value. So, you know, important pieces to look at. This is the last one, I believe.
Do you still include the appliances that are in there in that assessment, or is it just the structure itself?
If they're built-in appliances, you do include it.
Built-in appliances, got it.
Yeah. If they're easily removable, you know, just those you don't, but built-in, yes, you do. So there's a homeowner at 445 Pecan Hollow in the special flood hazard area, want to add a small room to their residence. Here's the estimated costs. So look at this and tell me what you think it is and answer it in the question and answer room. Something I want to talk about while you're answering this real quick is, so they're adding a small room onto their residence and they're in the special flood hazard area. So even if it isn't substantial damage, I'm not going to tell you whether it is or isn't right now. What might they have to do to that added on structure? If they're adding on a new piece of structure, might they have to elevate that even if they don't have substantial improvement or substantial damage or whatever they're doing here? Might they have to elevate that new portion of the structure to make sure it's within the code if they are below base flood elevation on the rest of the structure? Yes, they would, depending on all the different pieces of foundation and all those things. More than likely they would. You have to get into those IBC codes to look at the nitty gritty of what happens. So that's why I gave you those great references for the IBC codes, because those will help you out quite a bit with that. So this may be substantial improvement. The land cost should be removed from market value before comparing the costs. So those of you who said you got to remove that,
And
we're
there's
right
no
on it.
labor cost. Some smart people in the chat said, "Hey, where's the labor cost?" You're right too. It's
There you
not
go.
there. So questions you should be asking.
Yep, yep. So I think I already said this, but more than immediate damage, you know, there are things that are going to change, like the mold growth, the splitting of wood. Floors may bubble up after the fact once it dries. The floors might be scratched or damaged from removing the debris. So there are things that, you know, you've got to look at that when it happens and maybe a little bit after, or how you think those materials will react when you're looking at this. I want to make sure I get over to Jamie, so I'm going to wrap up my part here pretty quick so she can get into her section. But consider immediate damage you can see and how materials will behave. Recommended, adopt conservative methods for determining market value. If it's really close, if it's 40 to 60, take a second or a third look. Make sure you know how you're looking at it, and always do the same way every time to keep yourself out of legal trouble. You know, can't emphasize that enough. So after the disaster, act quickly before rebuilding. Target potential substantial damage structures first, because you may have to look at all these things. And if you need help performing substantial damage surveys, you know, there are other floodplain administrators that may be around you that could come help. Call and talk to myself. We can look at making that substantial damage plan for you. And please come out to our substantial damage trainings. We did one just recently, but we're always good to bring more to you. And record keeping is huge, because when I come out or FEMA comes out to do what's called a community assisted visit, which is basically an audit of what's going on in your community for floodplain management to make sure you're following your own rules and regulations of floodplain ordinance, because that's how you're staying part of the NFIP, is doing those. Then you are ready. You can just say, hey, look at this file. I've got it all here. If it's electronic, great. If it's paper, great. But make sure you have all those extra permits, a letter of map changes, anything that's happened in your community. Keep all of those things in a good, secure location and have backup systems. I think that in floodplain or in emergency management or floodplain management, you need to think something could happen to one set of records, have a second set for you to look at. I am going to turn this over to Jamie and give her control, although I think she can just take it from me. So
Do I want to take it? I don't know.
I think you do. I know you do.
Well, while we're kind of switching here, I do want to mention one more thing about post-disaster work. I know Kathy talked a little bit about that, but Kathy and I are in emergency management, and many of you know that already. We work with emergency management, and that includes our operations side and our mitigation and recovery section. So we are very interested after any event, big, small, in the middle, everything in between, of, you know, I like to see, I'm sorry, I geek out on stuff like this, and I like to see, you know, what has happened. You know, I obviously not all the time that we can get out there and have boots on the ground, but even taking photos, just going out and taking photos, drone footage. In some Carbon County took drone footage. Um, uh, you know, uh, or just help with doing damage assessments, with your emergency manager, to see if it's going to even meet a federally declared disaster. We like to see that kind of information, just so one, we can help you, and not only you personally, with your job, but help the city recover, and then see what kind of the extent of damage it is. So um, and maybe some of your pictures might end up on some educational materials as well. So because we don't get it, we get flooding, but we don't have a lot of documented flooding, I think, in our state. So anyways, just keep that in mind. When if you have anything going on, we do, like any kind of information we like to give you, we like to keep it local, at least for me, and provide examples locally rather than national stuff. So anyways, I will leave it at that.
And
So
as Jamie goes to share her screen, I just added one document and I want to take out another document so I can add one more. So make sure you're downloaded everything. I just added a flood map change viewer document that Jamie and her staff made. So make sure you get that as well. And I will add some others. So I'm going to give you like 5 minutes to download everything that's in the downloads right now. And I'm going to go change them out and give you some other stuff. So
okay.
as this is going.
So, oh, you are seeing the wrong one. Ah, okay.
Go to sharing.
Yep. Display settings. Let's try that one.
There you go.
Okay. So this is a lot of this is going to be review for folks. So I apologize. I'm going to talk a little bit about the types of maps, the types of information that you should be using to either make zone determinations or BFE determinations, and stuff like that. And then I'm going to go into, hopefully, a few minutes with the process of floodplain mapping. So what I want to do is go over a couple different types of maps that you might see in your community. Many of you that are in the northern half of the state probably don't need to worry about half of these, or some of these, because you've gotten some digital flood insurance rate maps. But those that, well, and I see someone from Washington County too, that's an exclusion. But some of you may have, unfortunately, some of these maps that are in your community. So wanted to kind of, if you don't know what you're looking for, wanted to give you some information. So there's several maps that are still hanging out there within our state. One of them is called a flood hazard boundary map, and it's called an FHBM. It's abbreviated, and it is in our grand scheme of things, it's an old map. It was basically used as one of the initial ways FEMA provided flood risk information to communities. And you may even have a digital flood insurance rate map that has just been converted from this old map. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for information like that. But wanted to point out that this is what a flood hazard boundary map looks like, and you may still have this in your community. This is actually an effective map for the city of Montecito in San Juan. So I pulled this directly from the Map Service Center. So this is what it looks like. It's not great. It's using very coarse data, but we are in the process, or my program is in the process of getting these into a digital format and updating the information. So the risk map program, that's what we do is we update and provide risk information for communities. So it does not show BFEs because it's all unnumbered zone A, no elevations. It's approximate, and again, like I said, it's the earliest form. So this is what it looks like on the maps here. We also have flood insurance rate maps, and I'm going to show you a couple different versions of what you may see at your local community, because FEMA in the last several years has updated the look of it. The information might not be updated, but the look and feel of the maps is changing. So the flood insurance rate map is abbreviated as FIRM. So if you see that, that's how we use the information. In some cases, it does show BFEs, and it may not in others. So unnumbered A zones may, excuse me, may still be on the firm. Sorry. Sorry. Um, it does, in a lot of cases, use engineering studies, but like I said, if it's an unnumbered A zone, it doesn't. If it's an AE zone, which we'll see, have a good look at the zones in a minute, it can show this information. And it is used for rating purposes, for insurance. So this is one version of a flood insurance rate map that you might see, a black and white version. Then in about the, I don't know, mid 2000s, they converted over to this aerial photo with a blue stippling designation. This is not the same area, so don't worry about that. But your current maps might look like this too. So blue stippling, all of it has the same information on it, just the visual look is different. And more recently, in the last, I would say 5 years, FEMA has transitioned into a color coding system, so it's a little easier to see the information on a map. Now they have better aerial photos, and now you can clearly see the different designations within the floodplain. So you have this gold or kind of brownish colored area. That's the area of 0.2% or 500-year floodplain. Your blue areas, just the blue, is either A or AE, so it's the special flood hazard area, or H or AO, what have you. It's anything with an A or a V. And then the red crosshatch or red stripes is your floodways. So it's a little easier to read, a little easier to see. I like the change personally, and you can see these zone designations are also shown on the National Flood Hazard layer, which we'll talk about in a minute. Wanted to quickly point out, some of you, I don't think there are a lot of them still out there, but you may still have a flood boundary and floodway map. Those are separate maps that were supposed to be used in conjunction with the flood insurance rate map before they were all converted onto one map. So you may still have this out there. Those that still have paper maps might still have this out there. Digital maps, you don't have to worry about this, but wanted to point out that these potentially are still out there. This happens to be a historic map from Weber County. It's not effective anymore, but they are extremely difficult to decipher. If you can see, I wanted to put the legend in here because the floodway is actually not colored. It's not a shaded area on this map, and that's your most dangerous area in a floodplain, which is your floodway. So it was very difficult to decipher where the floodway boundary was, and you had to use two maps in some cases, and very difficult. So wanted to point out that they're still out there. There's not many, hopefully, but they are still out there. But those of you lucky enough to have a digital flood insurance rate map, and we are working on it feverishly, my program, is that we call them DFirms. And they did convert all of the paper maps into a digital format, and in some cases you did get studies included in your DFirm update. And you can use these digital maps in any GIS system that you use, either with the county, community, with your engineer, what have you. It's basically just a single layer that you can overlay onto any system that you use, obviously making sure that the scales match. But yeah, they're all in digital. They're going to a digital format now, and it again is the newest form of the flood map. Wanted to point out these zone designations. So anything with an A or a V is considered your special flood hazard area. There are several other areas or several other zones that we may or may not have in the state. I don't know if there's, I think there's one A99. I don't think there's an AR zone in the state, but these are, a zone A is, an approximate zone A. There wasn't a detailed study done and no BFEs. Your zones AE, or on the older paper maps, they show A1 to A30. That's your AE zones with BFEs. And then you have AO is your sheet flow zones, and those have a depth and velocity. And then same with AH has a depth on them as well. Those are your ponding areas, and I'm going to show you an example of those in a second. But A99 is an area protected by levee and is under construction. I don't think we have any of those. But we do have V zones, which are considered velocity zones, and you would generally see those in coastal areas. But we do have large lakes here and very high wind. So there is a zone if you're lucky enough to be in Davis County, there is a V zone currently in Davis County, and that might expand with the Great Salt Lake study, just because we have very high winds. I mean, shoot, we just had, hurricane force winds earlier this year. So we do get those winds. And your V zones are basically a numbered V zone is no or no BFE, and your V zone VE does have a BFE. We do have zone Ds, specifically if anyone from Tooele County is on, or Box Elder County. We do have zone Ds, and those are probably some of the most difficult areas to manage and to obtain flood insurance in. Extremely high flood insurance, but it basically means that there is some kind of risk. It just hasn't been determined and hasn't been studied, and they think there's something there, or maybe a community said, oh, there's been past flooding there, but we really can't show, just a general area like an A zone is. There, it's just undetermined. So that's your zone Ds, and I want to get rid of those as quickly as possible. Because they're very difficult, very difficult. And then you have your shaded X zones, which is now your 0.2%, those gold areas on the new maps, or they would have an X with a shading on it on your older firms. And on paper maps, they might be shown as a B zone. So just keep those in mind. So a B zone is your shaded X zone, or 0.2%. And conversely, the unshaded X, so anything that doesn't have a shading, anything doesn't have a designation, we call it the unshaded X zone, or it's the area of low risk. And those are also identified as C zones on the older paper flood insurance rate maps. Unshaded or low risk, I want to point out, does not mean no risk. And we are seeing, because we in this state don't have all flood risk mapped. We're getting there. Well, not all, but we're getting more flood risk mapped as we go, but it does not mean no risk. And we have seen in the state numerous times where there has been flooding in these unshaded X zones. So please keep in mind that the low risk does not mean no risk. So I'm going to look very quickly, show you for those that haven't seen this map, or this type of new map. This is on the National Flood Hazard Layer, and I'll give you the website for that in a little bit. But wanted to show you what the different designations are. So we have that floodway, which is that red and blue crosshatch area, and then you have your zone AE that is designated. And then you either have BFEs, which is that squiggly line on the map, you'll have a BFE. And then you'll also have cross sections, which is a line with a hexagonal letter and that refers to information in your flood insurance study, which we'll talk about in a second too. And then you have your gold areas, and then you have your AH on this side, on the west side of the river here. And then how things look. So this is what a map could look like in your community. This happens to be in the Salt Lake County area. But yeah, these are the different types of designations that you have. So then we go to your flood insurance study. So everywhere any location that has had a detailed study will get a flood insurance study. If you only have zone A's in your community, you will not have one of these documents. Do not throw these away. These are probably, instead of the map, or in conjunction with the map, you should be looking at these documents, or this document here. It is a detailed engineering study. It only is certain water courses that were studied. Like I said, not every water course is studied, unfortunately, but hopefully we'll get there in your community. And it has text information. It's basically the narrative of how the study was done. And then it also has tables in there with data in it. So this is gold. Do not lose this. This is a very important document to help you regulate flood insurance. And it is, again, the basis for rating, insurance rating in your community. So I'm going to quickly go over this. Again, like I said, this might be review for a lot of you, but if you have a flooding source that was studied, it will tell you, like this happens to be for a generic river, Rocky River, and that each of those hexagonal cross sections on the map, this is the data that correlates with that line on the line. You don't interpolate in between, but this is the data that it's showing on that particular cross section. So your regulatory elevation would be that 9.9 feet, I guess. So anyways, so that this is the data that's on that line. And then if you want to get more detailed and develop, if you have information in between these cross sections, this floodway profile, or the flood profiles are where you're going to want to get the information. This looks like a lot of boxes, squares, and lines, but if you can kind of see that hexagonal cross section is identified, and then if you kind of look at on that cross section, if you go up to the line, and I wish I had a pointer. I did not do that in this particular presentation, but it will show you at what the 100-year flood elevation. If you go up straight up from that cross section line and you go perpendicular straight over to the left, it will tell you exactly what that flood elevation is at that location. There's a whole nother course on developing a BFE that we can do at a later date, but wanted to let you know that this is your most important data, because this is going to be where you can get your information or your BFEs to the nearest tenth of a foot. And I probably should have mentioned that these maps only go to the nearest foot, and you want information to the nearest tenth of a foot, because a lot can happen within that foot if you're not as accurate to nearest tenth of a foot. So if want to make sure that people are elevating to the nearest tenth of a foot. And in some cases, 100th. I've heard communities go to the 100th even. So not in our state, but different states do that. Okay, so the FIS determines your community's flood risk and the flow frequency. So how fast water's coming down. The CFS, the hydrology, that's great information to have. Establishes those BFEs and gives you flood profiles and calculates that floodway if it's available, if there's been a detailed study done. And these are the types of sections. Take a look at that study, or at the flood insurance study. It's not light reading, I'll say that, but it does follow a basic format. And I will say, I forgot to add a section. There is a section now that if you've gotten an update and have a DFIRM, a digital flood insurance rate map, there is an updates section of the flood insurance study to tell you what happened during that update from the original study. You also probably have flood insurance panels in your office. They're probably massive Z-fold panels, paper panels that you have, and this is the title section of the panel itself. It will tell you what community it's located in, and if you focus on the panel number, this is how you're going to kind of identify and clue in on where a development is in your community. So say you have a development that's going in on panel 344 of 660, and these are the communities that are included on that panel. So This happens to be in Alabama. I'm sorry, but the city of Birmingham and unincorporated county of Jefferson County are included on this panel. Then the map number is right here, and there's kind of a secret sauce, secret code to this map number. So the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers of the map number is your community identification number, your CID, your NFIP CID. And then the C in the middle is whether or not the map panels are countywide, or if they're a flood hazard boundary map, it won't say a C. So if it's a countywide map, it means all the mapping panels are contiguous now, and you can see them. And then you have the exact panel number, which is the next 4 letters, or excuse me, next 4 numbers of the panel number, which should correlate to that panel number up here. And then the letter on the end is the number of the revision. So if it's an A, there won't be a letter there. So the second revision would have a letter B here. A third revision would be a C, or sorry, the first revision would be a B, second revision would be a C, sorry, and so on. So that's what that letter is there for. And then obviously the effective date of the panel is right there. So if you ever wondered what this map panel number and why it's there, that's the secret code to that. The FIS also includes discharges. So whenever we do a detailed study, we do hydrology analysis, and we determine at what location on that river how much water is coming down that system, or what the CFS is at that particular location. So wanted to let you know that there is a summary of discharge table if there was a detailed study, and it should exactly correlate with the map down below. And then we talked a little bit already about the floodway data table. And again, that is at each cross section, that data for that cross section right there. So in the order of precedence of when you're using this information is your most accurate base flood elevation is going to be found on the floodway data table. If it's done, that's going to be your most accurate in riverine floodplains. There's also going to be stillwater elevations for lakes, or in some cases transects, which are V zones. We use transects instead of cross sections, and those that are going through that analysis will explain that more. But yeah, so the BFEs are listed in that table to the nearest tenth of a foot, and the floodway data table is good for that site at the cross sections. The next most accurate source is the elevation data in the profile. So first you have the floodway data table if one's been done. Then you go to the profile and measure and calculate, up and over what that nearest tenth of a foot is for that BFE. And again, we can do a whole nother training on that. Then the least accurate is your map, actually. Although the boundaries are good to look at the map, on the older maps, the BFEs are to the nearest foot. You don't want to use those. It's just a good reference. Maybe if you're calculating through the floodway data table, it's a good reference, but you should not be using anything from the map or accept any information from a surveyor on it for an elevation certificate says they used the map. They should be using the FIS to get that BFE determination. The newer maps are showing to the nearest tenth of a foot, but you might want to double check in the FIS again, just to be safe. So, and we talked a little bit of flood pros already. So using the map, so say you get a permit and you're like, where do I start? Well, first you want to find that location of the permit within the map. So is it an A or V zone? If it's not, then you don't need to go through the floodplain development process. But if it is, then you got to determine, the location of the property, if there's a BFE available, if it's in a zone A or AE, if there's a BFE available, and then make determinations from there. And then use estimate to guide, your regulatory decisions. So if you're in an AE, what are those decisions? And I'm probably running out of time. I'm out. So there's 4 places. I have several more, but there's 4 places to find information. Hopefully you guys have looked at these already, but you as a local community, we are going to point back to you. If we get questions from residents, we are going to say you got to check with your local community because you know your community way better than we do. But there's several places to go to find information, and I'll give these slides to Kathy. There's a new flood map change viewer where if you're in a process when we're updating your maps, you can see the difference between the 2 maps if you have digital forms already. I'm going to quickly go through those. I apologize. This is the National Flood Hazard Layer. If you have digital mapping, you can go to this site and use that to type in any address and then make your determinations from there. And, do you need to go to the FIS? Do you need to, what kind of regulatory stuff like that? And obviously the Map Service Center is another place to go that also includes all of your amendments, revisions, map changes, and if you have digital information, you can download the digital data from here. Only FEMA can change the NFIP maps. If you have a study that happened for a specific development that changes the floodplain, FEMA can only change the maps. If the map is not changed, you have to regulate to whatever the map says that is in effect at the time. There's various methods to change the maps. A LOMA and a LOMAR-F is a single structure or single property. And a LOMAR is your man-made condition changes. So say a major change to the stream channel or stuff like that. And this kind of goes over the difference between the amendments and revisions. And then there's fees associated with it and time. So make sure that's calculated into any project that you or a developer, maybe pass that information on to the developer that there are fees and time constraint or timelines associated with it, and it can extend a project. This is always the last thing that's on a developer's mind is this. And then wanted to point out quickly that here is the status of all of the mapping going on within the state. We have a ton of projects going on within the state, and if you haven't been contacted for any of these projects yet, you will, because it's either been funded or is in process. And I would say this Greater Severe project that we have, what we call the Wasatch Uinta Basin project, it's coming. So wanted to point out that we are in 21 of 29 counties for our projects. So it will be coming. And we also collected a ton of LIDAR in the last several years, 20,000 square miles this year alone, with help from the Risk Map program, including FEMA headquarters. And then there's a new process with base level engineering that you're probably going to hear about more often. And it is just basically a high level risk assessment of floodplains, and uses 2D modeling, high level 2D modeling in conjunction with hydrology and the LIDAR that everyone has or is getting. And then we can make decisions based on that, on where we want to study further in detail. I have a couple more slides. I apologize. If you're going through a map project right now, there are several phases or are upcoming. Our projects are very slow because they're so large. And our projects takes about 5 to 7 years to complete. So if you have any development going on in your community, do not wait for me. Do not wait for me to come update your maps. You as a community, that's one thing that you got to keep in mind, is you got to keep your maps up to date. And any LOMARs or map changes we can incorporate in our study if we need to, but do not wait for my program to come and do that, because it could take a while. And I think that is all.
Thank you, Jamie. That was
Sorry.
great. Now, there's just so much information. Maybe we should have
Yep.
made this 2 hours. Um, sorry for my interruption with my doggy. He's very sick.
Oh.
Um, I did put a couple of more things in for you guys to download. One of those was Jamie's flood map change viewer handout she had. The other one is the Utah NFIP Substantial Damage Program Plan. That's the one you want to download so you can use its layout to do your own plan and look at what you have to do for substantial damage in the special flood hazard area. It's got basically the ABCs and it's got a community checklist of what you have to do and a lot of good information. So I would say do that as well. And then one of Jamie's program's other handouts is my house in a high risk area, which is a really great handout for you to give to your citizens so that they can, if they're wondering about it, they can look it up. And it's good for you because it's a good reference in case you don't know where to go and look as well.
Yep. Put
So
it on your website. We're giving you information. Get it out there.
yeah. So we really do just want to be here to help. We hope that you join us on our Wednesdays lunch and learns. If you don't know what those are and haven't been invited and you want to be invited, I am going to put my email address, and Jamie can do hers in there too, to the entire audience. And you can reach out to us with questions or asking for more information or whatever. We're here to help, and if you want to come to those Wednesday lunch and learns, please let us know and we'll get you invited or send you the link. It's always the same link every week at noon on Wednesday that we do those classes. I'm having trouble typing and talking at the same time. So we do wish you all the best, and I realized I never unmuted you guys, and I'm sorry. We will try and do a little bit better next time. Hopefully I won't have a little emergency going on at the same time, and we will get back with you. But come to Wednesday's lunch and learn, and then you can ask us all the questions you want. There's always plenty of time for questions and answers during that, and you're all fully voiced, and you can put your faces out there and meet with us. So we appreciate you being here and hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.